We are on item 6 already, review of our financial documents. First up, FY26 first quarter financial report. Sean?
Thank you, Chair Santos. What I'm going to do as in prior period, I'm going to run through the P&L, and then when it comes to cash flow and balance sheet, I'm going to turn over to Stephanie to cover those. So in your book, if you don't mind opening page 16, which is the overall CA P&L, and then when you get there, let me know so I can continue.
I'm ready.
Okay, great. So just to get everybody oriented in terms of this table, the column on the left is actual to budget for the Q1, and the middle part is Q1 year-over-year analyses, and then the last column to the right is actual versus budget for the full year estimate. So I'm going to roughly go over the high-level numbers, then I'm going to revert to my overview document for detailed explanation. So just stay with me here for a second. And as you can see, the revenues for the quarter versus budget were about $600,000 or 1% over. And again, I'm going to come back and talk about some large variances when I get to the commentary. And then expenses, if you go to the bottom, operating expense totals, we were actually about 1.5 million below, or 6% versus budget. And the last line, decrease in net assets, as you can see, is about $2 million better. And again, 600,000 revenue and $1.5 million of that is expenses, therefore giving us about $2 million over budget increase in surplus, I should say, which is about 5%. And then if you move to the middle column, which is year-over-year analyses, and our revenues about almost $61 million versus the prior period, or about $2 million over, or 3%. And then if we move down to the expenses, you see that expenses are up about 1.1 million, or 5%. And I know we'll come back and talk about this because Tim in the prior meetings noticed that expenses grow much faster than the top line, which is true. We'll come back and talk about implications of that. And then if you follow again to the surplus line, and 2 million increase in revenues minus 1.1 million increase in expenses, therefore gives us roughly about $1 million year-over-year bottom line increase, which is 2%. And moving down to the last column to the right, which is the full year view, right now we are forecasting about 87.6 million estimate, which is about $1.2 million over, or 1% better than prior year versus budget, I'm sorry. And then look at the expenses. We are forecasting decline in the growth in expenses, as you can see, from 5% year-over-year to 2%. Or if you look at the quarter, expenses are down 6%, and we're giving some of that back to the organization, which is the timing of the expenses in the later part coming in. And therefore, that's why you don't see 6% repeating itself in the full year. The bottom line is, if you look at it, $5.9 million surplus, which is about 2.6 million better than the budget. So I have done some analyses, looked at the last year quarter, the quality estimate. Last year we showed about $5.2 million, and by the time we end up the year, we end up close to $11 million. So again, this is the bottoms up from the organization in terms of where we think we're going to finish Q1. And again, Q1 doesn't necessarily make the full year, but I'd like to point out that majority of our revenue from the annual charges already in the bank. We got that. It's a big chunk of money. And then rest of the stuff really is going to come back from the community program services, memberships, the rest of the year. I looked at it from a different perspective a little bit. I said, if I just play the numbers, do the analyses, top line growing, the CAGR, compounded annual growth rate, for those who don't know what CAGR is, or average annual growth rate, based on the last 3 years, the top line is growing about 3%. I said, if I apply the same percentage to expenses, top line, bottom line growing 3%, we should end up someplace roughly as sequentially by $11 million, which is roughly the same as last year where we did. Again, that's if everything lines up, happens, and don't run to the bank with that, but that's one data point you can get there. If I took the revenue at 3%, Tim did 5% increase in the expenses, that gives me a range someplace between $6 million to $10 million range we are looking at in a full year. So when we go to second half, we'll probably take a closer look at the forecast and where we're going to end up the year. But the implications for that is that assuming top line and bottom line is the same as last year with the 86.2 million and the bottom line roughly 11 million, and we spent the same level of dollars, which is $14.5 million CIP, 5.2 million debt service, we'll most likely end up in the $2.4 million net cash. So that's where we're going to end up roughly. And again, that's all between now and the end of the year. A lot of things could happen. And we all know, we all watch the news. You were in the board town hall meeting, upsides and downsides, but they're all yet to show up. What I can also tell you is we already began seeing the impact of tariffs. Some of our bills for the gym equipment, everything else, right on the invoice, tariff is a separate line coming through. So just wanted to point out to the committee members. So having set that stage in the overall, I'm just going to move on to my commentary page. The revenue variances, actual the budget, annual charge, as I spoke to you, on budget, really on target, and the full year should be where we are. The direct and allocated membership, the great news so far for the quarter, we are up by $170,000 or 3.4%. And this is as a result of membership counts and revenue data. If you look at the data in pages 28 through 32. So this is Dan and his team's efforts selling and revenues growing there. Loss and gains on disposal, you'll see that $181,000 above budget. And this is, again, a similar story to the prior year. It's just we are doing a lot of new projects, and we are discarding and disposing projects with the book value. And because we are replacing those, we have to write them off. And so some of the big projects in there really stream restorations, bridge project, and Fairway Hills. And for the full year, we're expecting to be about $437K unfavorable. Other revenue, again, I just want to put it out there. We expect to be 1.3 million over budget. We have the same issue as last year. The budget understated the interest revenue, and it's same reason as we said to the board last time. The pool for the budget was understated, so you should finish the year about 1.3 million better versus budget. So we're going to talk about year over year, but we're going to be about 1.3 million better. Revenue versus year over year. Again, it's the same as before, the same trends. We grew about $1.4 million or 3%. And it's assessments, natural growth, drives that process. And again, direct and allocated membership, $466,000 or 9.6% higher. Again, kudos to Dan and his team and selling hard out there and getting that portion of revenue help us on the annual charge and lift the burden a little bit. So again, as continued membership and sales driving that process. Tuition and enrollment is up by about $138,000. And this is as a result of expanding capacity at 3 schools. And those are Ethelon, Northfield, and Waterloo. And finally, the other revenue year over year. If you remember, for versus budget, we're up by $1.23 million now versus year over year. It's a little bit different story. We're expecting about 175 lower than prior year. Our total pool, average total pool invested this year versus same period last year was a little bit lower. Because at that, we have lower earnings. Okay. Moving on to expenses, the budget. Operating expenses are about 1.5 million, as I stated earlier, or 6% below. And for the full year, we're going to be roughly about 2%. Personnel expenses, $281,000 below budget, and expected to finish the year about 511 better. So some of the financial analysts, friends of mine, are going to take that and run rate for the year, it's roughly $1.1 million. But we're going to give that away as we hire more people. So that's why we end up 511 as opposed to $1.1 million. Obviously that's as a result of vacant roles. Right now I have 7 vacant roles, and these are full-time people. And I'm sure it has some part-time as well, but 7 full-time people in Q1. And technology expenses over budget by 171, and related to the timing of the CRM expenses and the financial software, system software expenses. That's yet well, it's coming, it's happening. It's just a timing issue. But overall, for the year, we expect to be on plan. Fees, $616,000 under budget. Again, this is mainly a timing issue in terms of consulting services for the CRM implementation hasn't taken full speed ahead yet, and also as well as some of the legal fees in the later part of the year. And depreciation, again, under budget by 411, and it's anticipated we're going to end up about 612 to the better. And primarily, there are a bunch of CIP projects that we don't expect to finish for the year. And as the projects get delayed, so is the deployment and the depreciation that we estimated versus budget. Main projects that make up that 600,000 were pathways and facilities and similar stuff that this organization does day in, day out in terms of serving the community. So the next step, I want to move on to expenses year over year. The personnel we talked about versus budget versus actual right now is $754,000 year over year, and the two primary drivers of that is the 4% merit kicked in, roughly about, I did a high level estimate, over $300,000 of that variance is related to merit. And then we also brought in 3 pools. They were the Bryant Woods, Locust Park, and Dasher Green, Dan, correct? And as you may recall, last year they were outsourced, and this year we brought them back in-house again. So what you will see is swapping of expenses, fees versus labor costs, and that's what you're seeing here. Technology, supplies, and expenses, $319,000 higher than the same period last year. And 2 main drivers, actually 3 main drivers, are voice over internet protocol that Armstrong and his team updated our phone systems. And related to hardware purchases, they onboarded new procurement solution, and as well as new scheduling software and codecs, if I can say that. So and then operating expenses about 103 more than the same period. This is as a result, actually, believe it or not, CFO role was not budgeted in the budget. So it's recruiting fees related to my role. And we also had higher credit card fees because revenues went up. And so we are taking the hit as credit card fees, roughly 3.5%, maybe higher.
That's point of sale at the membership. Got it.
That's correct. And then swipe the credit cards. And as well as the team acted properly, knowing that the tariffs are coming ahead. So they went ahead and did a lot of purchase so that we don't have to pay higher prices on that. So there's a little bit of escalation of purchases to make sure that we save money by buying it now, as opposed to waiting until tariffs kicked in. And next line is about $142,000 of fees below prior year. And again, as I mentioned, it's a swapping of the fees in terms of pool management and coming in-house. So, and the utilities were just like the prior year catch up year over year, 141 unfavorable. So overall, very similar to what you have heard in the past. The Q1 is always, it starts high because that's where all the money comes in. And as the months go down, we deplete cash, we pay for projects. And Stephanie's going to talk to you about, we also spent so far about Q1 about $3.2 million already in PP&E. And everybody knows what that is, PP&E, property, plant, equipment, or CIP. Sir.
Quick question. You lost me that figure that you had, that you rattled off. I didn't catch it.
The $3.2 million PP&E, I said property, plant, equipment, or CIP.
I just didn't catch the figure, but you got it to me. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So at least my high-level analysis and description of the main drivers. And I'm open to your questions.
Okay. Did you have any follow on there, Reg?
Yeah, I did. I'm interested in the tariffs and how that, I mean, you kind of pointed out how that's affecting us. How badly or how is that affecting us overall?
I mean, really, so far, it's really marginal because it just kicked in and it takes time to go through the supply chain. But I have so far, I signed one and that clearly had one line for the gym equipment. And, but it's not substantial, but it will be as we go through the next 9 months because it kicked in.
Right.
So
right.
I couldn't tell you right now because it's.
But the trend is
it will impact and we'll have to quantify what it is. But right now it's been really marginal and as the stuff comes in.
And the effect on our bottom line?
Of course it will. I mean, this is.
What I'm saying is the effect on our bottom line is that we're going to bring in.
I don't know because it's all subject to how much we're buying, how much is subject to the tariffs. And we'll have to take a shot at it and make an estimate. Okay. But that involves really taking your expenses apart.
Right.
Obviously, labor, I'm not going to pay tariff on it, right? Which
will
chunk up my expenses.
Yeah.
And then I will say, okay, I have only 9 months left in the year. And then apply a rate, let's say 4%, 5%, 10%, and try to get an estimate. So
I was just interested because you had mentioned it, and I was thinking how the overall effect was. And
it's really marginal. I was just giving you one example of what I saw coming through. It's the beginning of what is yet to come.
Okay, so, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can add to that. So we had a discussion about this early on when the tariffs started months ago. And procurement, we have a policy that we do not pay for tariffs. Now, they can incorporate that into the costs, but Sean brought that if there's a line item, we have a policy internally, we don't pay that. So we're not paying tariffs. They're going to get rolled into the cost of whatever it is, but we don't want to see a line item for tariffs because that's really not our responsibility.
Okay. So Sean, thank you for bringing that up. I mean, our policy says you need to roll in the product. Most of the suppliers are refusing to do that. So it comes to a business decision. Either I don't buy it or I change my policy. So we had this discussion with Dan, and because the invoice listed the tariff separately, our policy says you can't do that. But you know what? It's the largest vendor. They don't care about your policy.
Yeah.
They're not going to sell it to you. Sorry. I mean, I think we have to be realistic about what we can and cannot do. If you want that gym equipment to be in place for the customers.
Well, just like a car, you want that car, and the dealership's going to try to put their destination cost in there. But you say you're not going to pay for it. So okay, well, great, no problem. But they put it in the price of the car anyway.
There's a policy conflict, though.
Yeah.
I mean, Sean raised that, and if I don't pay it, they're not going to sell me the equipment.
Yeah. It's business.
Yeah, I mean, we're a minor organization. They're $1 billion company. Guess what? They will go and care of it. I said, no, I'm not going to pay for it.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Sky.
I'm too short here. I'm also concerned about the tariffs, and you said that they have already come into play. Can you prognosticate what I know the tariffs are going to be very volatile, but can you anticipate what parts of our programs might be more affected than others, and how CA is going to ameliorate some of those, or just do away with some things that we ordinarily would have purchased or whatever. And I'm wondering if is anything going to go down in price because of the tariffs, or will everything just go up or remain the same?
My educated guess will be everything will go up,
Everything.
subject to tariffs. So I don't know if you heard me say earlier, I need to take a look at our total pool expenses, start pulling out like labor, which is not subject to tariff. And I need to go function by function, find out exactly what pool expenses subject to tariff. But what I could tell you, potential supplies that come from overseas, because we also take a look at the source destination that's subject to tariff. So anything domestically sourced, not imported or exported, will be fine. But if I'm getting anything from Europe, China, Mexico, all that stuff, guess what? We all know what the schedule is. They're all slapping 10, 20, 30% taxes on them. But I need to be able to look at each function and find out what that pool is. Then we might be able to do some estimated, educated guesses in terms of, what is that impact on the organization. But I expect that it's going to drive expenses up from your school supplies to cleaning supplies to everything else.
So you'll be making some decisions to go ahead and be affected by the tariffs, and others you will just get by without purchasing those items?
No, I'm not saying that. Whatever
Will
business.
it be an item by item decision?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know that right now until we can take a look at it. Literally, we have to take a look at everything that we're sourcing. So the distinguishing item is it being brought from overseas? If the answer is yes, then I have to go take a look at how much did I buy last year, and then approximate based on, so the same thing I'm going to buy, say X dollars on it. So, but the first step really, Sky, is finding out exactly what pool of goods or services is subject to tariff. Otherwise, I'll be just making up numbers on the fly.
Yes, go
Yeah.
ahead.
All right,
Tim,
Tim's
please.
turn. I'm waiting patiently.
Step up to the plate.
No, I mean, Sean, you kind of hit some of the things I was already noting. Because you're mentioning like a bottom line of like $6 million, I think you said something like that in the ballpark. And then if you pull out the depreciation, that's part of that bottom line number, you get back to about $20 million of operating cash flow, which is
Same as last year.
same as last year. Yeah, same
Yeah.
as the last 2 or 3. You look at that page 9 chart.
Yep.
That's like my whole, like my Bible there, and it has the same like $20-ish million for the past 3 or 4 years. So great to hear that we're keeping on pace. Certainly you don't want to have a drop would be not great to see. But of course, and it looks like if you pull out the emergency cash reserve,
Break even more or
contribution,
less.
we're break even on
Yep.
cash. I mean, so I get a few kind of little mini questions, I guess, that and I can't remember where the reserve contributions, do we foresee those like potentially happening every year, or is that going to be something that?
So the board approved 18.8, roughly $19 million. We are currently sitting at 16.1 million.
Yeah.
And FY27 has a 3 million. So by the time we finish this year, we should get to our target initially approved by the board. So, I have some recommendations to the board. It's on the board side if you want to take a look at what I recommended. So, the best practice is what is recommended for our size on not-for-profit 3 to 6 months. Right now, 18 million, our burn rate is 7 million. That's everything, including debt service, paying the interest, everything else. We burn $7 million on average. 3 months is in $21 million. And my recommendation to get us to maybe to 5 months or so, because that also has implications on our credit rating as
Right.
the management and the board undertake long-term capital planning and the timing of how much we have to undertake. We may need to go borrow whether it is, a commercial paper or bonds. And for that, we'll have to have our credit rating. Right now, we're AA1, which is the double equals to the S&P and Fitch AA plus. If we could get to triple A, that's probably about 30 or 40 points worth. And I did an analysis in a high level AA plus versus a triple A, assuming you borrow 30 million for 25 years at that spread that I mentioned to you, roughly about $1.6 million of interest expense incrementally. So, I mean, there are a lot of ways to look at that. And so my recommendation to the, on the board side, some incremental revenue increases and stuff like that. But it's all just recommendations at this point.
Just to keep going with that reserve contribution to get
Yeah,
to
I mean, I think
a 3 to 6 or more closer to a 6 month of operations target.
that is what is recommended. You pull up any place, what is the best practice? 3 to 6 months, 3 months being floor, 6 months being max, someplace in the middle, which is also highly favorable seen by your credit agencies.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, and the sort of next part of my little question block is that you hit up on it like with a 3% assessment increase on the revenue side, but matched with a 4% increase or thereabouts on payroll on the expense side, plus maintenance. I'm sure it goes up a bunch. Insurance has got skyrocketed this year. You're fighting like I feel like we're going to fight a losing battle of trying to keep ourselves afloat. Is there is there a sort of a plan of attack on that, or has that been baked into the forward thinking of the membership rates and things like that? So,
I mean, obviously every year Dan looks at his numbers and making sure we are still competitive when it comes to non-resident, resident, and affordability. Those are all the things that we have to balance. And so there's a ceiling what we could do in terms of that revenue growth. But from the expenses, you're 100% right. I mean, the trend for the past 3-5 years is outpacing your top line growth. And that's diluted, right? Eventually, that margin erosion is going to catch up. And that's why I said 3% growth, 3% debt assuming. But there's a lot of room between there. That doesn't still even factor the fact that I might have to come back and do an estimate of X dollars because tariffs kicked in, which was not baked into the year. So that could up that 5% to 10%. I don't know that. But ultimately, I think we're in a good place to weather that. But we'll have to honestly take a look at it. If it goes to 10, 15%, 3 times your top line, 3X, then we'll come back and say, we cannot sustain this. So you can go 2 places, right? You can go to revenue, you can go to expense. Right. So, I mean, but I don't think we are there yet, so.
Gotcha. And certainly on the cash flow side, also capital expenditures as not a P&L item, but a cash flow out, something to mitigate, so it's sort of evaluate, can that 14 million come down to 10 or so, let's say, just as an example, and we still preserve our capital stock.
100%. Thanks for bringing that. Most people don't really understand the relationship, right? They look at 11 million revenue and says you get floating in cash. That 11 only produced last year $2.4 million, if I could remind people.
Right.
Because you take that operating income, 11 million, then you got to pay $14.5 million CIP, another 5.2 million debt service. That all goes into that. So you can't look at the surplus and say, oh, do a bunch of things. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, you got to take a look at doing all of those stuff with 1,400 people for 90 million revenue. We netted $2.4 million.
Yeah, right.
So that really is at the end of the day, the real score of the organization. And not necessarily what if the income goes on, guess what? That CIP has to go down, or we have to go dip into a line of credit or borrow. I mean, obviously, those are the things that options available, but they all come at a cost. Now I got a higher interest debt or debt service I got to do.
Okay. And then last little part of that's just, I guess, call food for thought, really. I'll call it for kind of strategic discussions. But again, one sort of more pointed question. And thank you for pointing out the membership chart, because there's a little interesting trend there is like that the One Fit, the Columbia Gym, and the Athletic Club They all sort of had modest increases versus the last quarter, but a pretty good sizable increase versus the same quarter last year. There was a pretty good surge in those memberships, if I saw it correctly. So that's sort of supporting all the what we know, what we noticed in the figures about the membership revenue increase. So that's all like, so, you know, keep that up. It's like, I guess my goal, my point there is keep that up. And, and then, but I guess the interesting thing was the play and fit and the play and play and fit, like there was like a dive and then like, it's like a V, you know, so you went down and up. Is there like is that just sort of what happened this year, or is that like a cyclical thing or a trend? I was just curious.
No, there was a few periods where, particularly after summer, a lot of non-residents were buying fit and plays month to months to use the pools because it's cheaper than buying a family
Okay.
one fit or a
Right.
family play for a non-resident. So we reached some price breaks that will create some fluctuations at certain times of the year on that.
Gotcha. So like after the summer month, it's the summer month and summer quarters. Yeah, it's sort of
Yeah, we
temporarily dies.
We altered a few things to make it a little more challenging this year, so we shouldn't see that same dip this year.
Okay,
But yeah, there's people figure out the pricing strategies and what is the cheapest.
Yeah, gosh, they worked their way. Okay, worked their way to like a game plan to do that.
Correct.
Okay, all right. That was all my questions. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good job, good job.
Say something, did I hear something? No. Okay, I thought somebody was going to jump in.
Just a couple of final thoughts from me.
Sure.
Thanks for my colleagues here on the committee for asking good questions. I just want to say, bang up job first quarter for everybody, top to bottom. You know, being able to beat budget on expenses. I don't want to say beat budget. I get in trouble for using catchy terms, but doing better than what we had budgeted, you know, our actuals, that's fantastic. And then holding it to $1 million year over year with all of the things going on, we're just setting the table for the uncertainty that we're seeing coming in the rest of this year and doing a great job during our most active part of the season. So great job to everybody for doing that. And I think that's probably, you know, one of the best ways that we can be ready for tariffs and shutdowns and all the other things that are on the horizon here. I did have one question on the tariffs. Do we actually have access to a book or a list or some sort of device that does have the alternative American sourced products for coffee cups and things like that we could take advantage of? Have we looked into that kind of strategy at all, or are we just trying to hold the line on no tariff lines on our invoices here?
I think most of the products, they're not changing to American products. Some of them you can't get, you know, for instance, lumber is coming from Canada.
Yeah, no, I know there are some that you're just not going to be able to, but if there are any, you know, I don't know if there's an American swimming pool furniture maker or something, you know, I'm throwing things out there.
I guess with procurements, you know, they look at what's the best
Yeah,
price for
sure.
value. So if it's American made and you know,
Right.
nicer price, but sometimes they're not submitted as bids.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
those procurement things get a little bit complicated because when you're part of the large source well as Omni purchasing groups where we get
Okay.
20-30% discounts. If we by ourselves go as a $90 million organization, guess what? We are not getting any discount. So I think until those large organizations collectively start looking at sourcing the United States versus what is coming.
Yeah.
And Bill, you know as well as I do, you walk through a Walmart, I challenge you to find one thing made in America. I mean, it's very difficult. And the reality is we bring almost everything from, you know, overseas.
Okay, all right.
And so,
Just appreciate the insight. It's, you know,
That's the big challenge is even if it's made in America, the parts come from overseas.
parts
Yeah.
assembled.
Yeah.
And that's why the fitness equipment, you know, they all have manufacturing plants here, but they source all their materials and products overseas. So what you end up seeing is, you know, we don't actually see tariffs, it's import fees.
Yeah.
But so that's, you know, that's how it's passed on.
okay, all right. Well, I appreciate the hard work. Thank you all. And I'll get out of the way so we can get this meeting moving on.
So
So,
welcome.
all right, what are we going to now, Stephanie?
Balance sheet, yeah. I don't get the pretty book. I get the insert in. So
Yeah.
the plain black and white paper. We're going to start on page 2 with the statement of financial position. And we'll start with, see, my sheet has a cheat on it where I have the differences. Yours doesn't. But cash decreased by 1,042,000 compared to the prior year. That's after adding 5 million to the emergency cash reserve. When you look at our accounts receivable, it declined, which is a good thing, 1.1 million, and that's, excuse me, it declined, yes, no, 750. Thank you. And that's largely because of the 1.1 million that we've collected on the annual charge already. So that was the big swing. And I want to put a shout out to my group. They've already collected 92% of it. And by year end, they always end up around 99.6%. So they do a very good job on that. That increase in annual charge was reduced by some membership receivables, which is largely on the AR repetitives. We also had an additional cost in other of 82,000, and that's primarily because we adjusted the rent accrual for the Turn House, the part that's based on their revenue. So we increased that. When we get to prepaid, that one decreased, and that was largely because last year we were implementing the CRM. And when we did that, we had probably about 242,000 of additional charges that were put in prepaid, and we didn't have them this year. And then, like Sean had already talked about, the increase that we had in the risk fund and the workers' compensation fund are strictly interest related. I do see those going down now as they're cutting the interest rates. They've cut the first quarter. And so we're adjusting our estimates for the rest of the year accordingly. They said there could be 3 more cuts by the end of 2025, and they might put 1 in 2026. So we're trying to adjust our numbers not to be quite so aggressive. But right now we're still earning probably about 4% on our investments. When you get to the PFE, or the property, facilities, and equipment, we increased that by about, say, 1.6 million. And you can look at page 17, footnote 6, and that gives you a lot of the detail on what was occurring, page 17. And then if anybody wants to know what's in other, the large part of other generally is livestock. And it's used for accruals and CPI. So that's what you're seeing there. Then when we get down to the next line, which is your operating lease, it's only netting the asset and the liability together. It's only a change of about 62. And the finance is pretty much break even. I will stop here and ask if anybody has any questions on the assets.
Members, any questions? Nope.
Yeah.
All right, let's rock and roll right into the liabilities then. Turn the page. Let me mention real quick the capital expenditures and stuff that we did. We did a lot of outdoor pool activities and stuff like that. They did tiling at the Stevens Forest Pool. They did the birthday patio and shade at Swansville. They did deck work at Talbot Springs. Then also in addition to the parking lots and the tot lots, the bridges, watershed and everything. So that's where a lot of the money went. Now we'll go into the accounts payable.
Really quick on that, was the tiling at Bryanwood's pool also included in that?
Mm-hmm.
I just know we took that entire shell apart.
Yeah, it would have been, yeah.
Okay.
It's just in the list there. So now let's get into the accounts payable. Accounts payable decreased by about 2 million, a little over 2 million. A lot of that was some adjustments that we were making because we're finally closing Haven on the Lake. So we were making adjustments to the a loss allowance and the tenant allowance abatement and things like that. So that was the largest part of that. It probably made up over $1 million of the difference, of the 2 million difference. The rest of it was basically increase in accrued payroll and accounts payable, and then the employee benefits payable. We also had a $742,000 increase in deferred revenue. It's primarily driven by 325 rise in membership revenue, and that's basically on the repetitives. And I'm here now to answer your other question. Your other that sets out there includes gift certificates that haven't been used, deferred. It includes things like the lessons, deferred lessons when people pay for lessons, and block fees. And also it has the historic Oakland Mills elevator grant in there.
Yeah,
So all of those combined to make up that total.
thank you.
The term loan decreased by 5.1 million. That's basically loan payments. You can see the detail on that on footnote 9, page 18. And lastly, the capital, which is now called the finance lease obligation, decreased by 141,000. That again was repayments. You can find that on page 19, footnote number 10. Any questions on liabilities?
Quick question. You sparked my interest when you mentioned Haven on the Lake. What is the status? I mean, do we sell it outright? Have we gotten rid of it? We no more? We don't have any other?
The lease expired, yeah.
The lease expired?
August 31st.
Sublet that after we closed Haven,
Yep.
and then our lease expired on August
Amen.
31st. So that space is no longer ours. The Pearl is there, it's theirs. We're officially out of the Haven on the Lake business.
And I pray we never do that again. Thank you.
That's a discussion for a different day. It was
Yeah.
a great idea. We just, as an organization, we didn't execute it well.
Yeah.
But it was a phenomenal concept.
I'm just happy that we've got rid of it and that any cost to us is
Correct.
done and over with. Thank you.
I think all
We mailed in the keys. We mailed the keys back.
Well, thank you.
All right, we'll move along to page 6, which is the statement of cash flows. I'm not going to go through a lot of this because you've basically already heard it on the balance sheet or the income statement, and this is just redistributed it to make it cash. So you're like adding back the depreciation and all the differences. So we get down to the bottom, and the very bottom, the cash equivalents compared to last year, we're down about 4,000. And there's not much to say there. I mean, you know, any questions on it? Yes.
All right. I noticed the bad debt expense. What is that?
You always have to estimate what debt you're not going to collect. And most of that has to do with memberships, because the way we have the annual charge is in the deeds. Even if we don't get it right away, we'll get it when they sell the house or they sell the property. So most of the estimate is you're estimating who is not going to pay their membership fees on their month to month.
Pretty accurate.
It is pretty accurate. We adjust it every month when we close. We take a look at the age of the receivables and make a determination.
Okay. Thank you.
Seems to be getting better.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Tim?
Pretty clear cut.
Sky? All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Stephanie. Great job. And that concludes the presentation portion there.